All right, another podcast from the Michigan Institute of Athletics in Brighton, Michigan. It's going to be a stellar podcast today. Right before I get into it, I want to shout out VetLife. VetLife is a 501c3 nonprofit company. It's a company of veterans for veterans. Every veteran faces difficulties when transitioning from active duty back to civilian life, and VetLife is there to ease that transition. If you want to reach out to VetLife, you may do so through Instagram or Facebook, or check out their website at vetlifetoday.org. So without further ado, I want to introduce Brian Richardson. Brian, you have quite the story, and I don't want to steal any of your thunder. I want to let you be able to tell the whole story. But as I was reading your resume, I was extremely impressed. You're definitely a dreamer, a creator, someone that can take a vision and then, through steps, bring it to life. So for the guests that don't know you, let's start all the way back. Were you born and raised here in Michigan? What were you like as a child, and how did you find, what you needed within yourself to just be this visionary in the world?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me. Honor, pleasure to be here. I was born, I think, in Livonia, and I grew up in Dearborn, East Dearborn, then the west side of Dearborn. So, yeah, Michigander. My parents briefly moved to Denver when I was like 3 or something, and I have a few memories of that. And then they came back. My dad was trying a seminary school out there, and that didn't work out, so we came back and got a quote-unquote real job, which he hated for most of his life. But growing up, I just had really awesome parents, and they were a tremendous blessing. And the older that I got, the more I realized that.
You actually just said something to me that I already want to question. Is when
Yeah.
you said, I witnessed my dad, go through a job that he hated for most of his life.
Yeah.
Do you think that made an impression on you as a kid because he went for something else? You saw him be in a job that he wasn't really satisfied with? Or do you not really think that was a factor in you following your dreams and visions?
I think it affected me a little bit, yeah. I mean, in hindsight, I never thought about it consciously because he was a great dad, and my mom was a great mom. So when you're growing up, you're not aware of those things, but I'm sure it did, yeah. And no one's ever asked me that, so cool question. Appreciate that.
I'm always just trying to, what makes somebody tick.
Yeah.
And it's just like Jim Carrey did a speech where he talked about his father could have been a famous comedian, but instead he went the route of being an accountant because he wanted to play it safe. He wanted to be able to take care of their family, and they actually end up being let go from the accounting job, and now they had to scramble to survive. So he's basically like, yo, if you can fail on what you don't want, go for what you want. And you just talked about that same thing, even if it was a deep, your subconscious was witnessing this and going, wait a second, maybe my dad had potential for something else, but he took the route of, being conservative, taking care of the family.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you went a different choice. So briefly before the podcast, you were saying to me that one of the things that really stands out to you as a beacon of who you are or what's helped you reach your goals is your faith. And was that instilled upon you at an early age from your parents? Did you come from a very religious family? You said you had a strong family unit.
Yes, awesome question. And when my parents met, neither one of them were followers of Jesus or Christians. I mean, they just, culturally, we're Christians, but they didn't really know what it meant. And before they got married, they, essentially had the born-again experience where they surrendered their lives to Jesus and decided that they were going to learn and follow and try to be more like him. And so when I was a kid, we were going to church. And, when I was 4 years old in a Sunday school class, it's almost a kind of a cliche kind of a thing. They're like, okay, they tell us about Jesus. And who wants to put Jesus in your heart? And I'm like, yeah, I do, And I really did. And every time opportunity I got, I'd raise my hand again and say, come on in. Yeah, I want him to come in again. Because I just thought it was the coolest thing that if the God of the universe who created everything wants to have a relationship with me, I thought that was pretty awesome. So I was like, yeah, I'm in. Sure, let's do it. And so growing up, my parents the blessing I had is that they were new Christians, so to speak. So they didn't have all the answers. They didn't have the rote responses if you ask questions, because we say so, or because they're like, I'm not really sure. Let's find out. Let's see what the Bible says, or let's ask some people who might have. So they taught me from an early age critical thinking skills. Rather than just telling me what to think, they taught me how to think, which is so missing in our culture these days. I mean, it is a vacuum, and it is horror. It's heartbreaking to me. We just do what we're told. We're not given the skills to learn how to think for yourself. So that was, like I said, one of the many blessings that they gave me as a child.
It's funny that you say that because Darren said something on the podcast. Darren McCarty was just in here from the Red Wings, and that's another man that at a young age decided I'm going to be in the NHL, and like that's a major jump. Like, and most families or society usually crushes that dream, right? You're not going to be in the NHL. That's the 0.001%. But he had this delusional belief in himself that like no matter what happens, I promise you I'll be an NHL player. Yeah. And then he went on to do that. But one of the things he talked about on the podcast is he's like, from a young age, I always had to know why. He's like, I couldn't be told something. Yeah. You couldn't say, Darren, this is what you have to do if I didn't understand why. And he said that type of thinking was absolutely pivotal to his success because no matter what, a lot of the times, when you're told, well, you can't accomplish that, if you simply ask why, there's very little to that basis because you're a human being, just like those human beings you're watching play in the NHL on TV. Right. So when you start to separate some of those illusions, you know what I mean? Like, well, why can't I be successful? Why can't I be, whatever I want to be in this lifetime? I think you start to get closer to the truth. And the truth is usually that you do actually have the potential. Now, you might have to back it with work ethic. You might have to back it with discipline. But you have the potential to be what you want to be. So you come from a strong family unit. They're trying to improve their lives. That's what I hear from the story right off the bat.
Absolutely.
You're witnessing your parents trying to level up versus being complacent with where they are and accepting their struggles. So it's setting a great foundation for a young child to see like, hey, look, they're trying to get better. They're trying to figure things out. They're willing to say they don't know.
Yeah.
Because
that's a big one.
I remember big time when you're a kid, you think adults have all the answers. Yeah. And a little bit of vulnerability from an adult to be like, you know what? I don't know that. Yeah. But we can kind of figure that out together. That's a phenomenal example. Now, are you the only child? No,
I was for a while. And then when I was 9, my parents adopted my sister. And so we were a pretty far age apart. 9 years is pretty far. But I would always get jealous of her because my friends would come over and they want to see her. I'm like, she's a baby. Come on, let's go play. They're like, no, we want to see her. I'm like, come on, really? But she's awesome, and she's a huge testament to my parents. She is actually a principal dancer at the, I hope I don't butcher the name, in Dresden, Germany, at the Symphonium Opera and Ballet. And she's a principal dancer. She's like 1 in 300 million that made it to the top pinnacle. So she's like a shining, I'm so proud of her. And of course, I taught her everything she knows about dance. But funny story, before you respond, I took Taekwondo for about 3 or 4 years. So I want to speak a little bit to your audience. And at kind of my point of the highest physical skill set, I didn't have the mindset of a black belt, but I had the physicality of a black belt. But as you know, the mindset makes all the difference. Anyway, I'd come home and be like, I just learned the spinning hook kick, and I could do a spinning hook kick, so far up in there. I'm like, check this out. And she goes, oh, you mean like this? She whips it off, no problem. I'm like, how'd you do that? She's like, oh, that's easy. What do you mean? I'm like, no, that's not easy. It took me like 3 months of training to figure out. So I get so mad at her because she was, way beyond me in terms of physical skill with her training. It was just really funny.
I think before we go to the next chapter of your story, as we lay this all out, one of the cool things for listeners and audience, in current society, there's a lot of kids struggling with anxiety, a lot of kids struggling with belief in themselves, so many people that are kind of lost. There's a recipe for success in what you're saying, that a strong family unit that's able to not just be, pure authority style, because I said so, don't ask questions. Right. Like, really, that's closing a mind.
It is.
Because a kid is inquisitive. They're trying to solve the problem for themselves. And if you just tell them, because I said so, you're basically shutting down that part of their personality. Yeah. You should question why. Whether it's, now there are times that just show respect and listen to your parents.
Absolutely.
But overall, your parents produced that successful type of thinking both in you and your sister. And success leaves clues, So a lot of the breakdowns I think we're witnessing could actually be solved by simple, like, reestablishing family units, bringing people back together, good dialogue and conversation in the way that we interact with each other. So after, so you're religious as a young kid, you're coming up, you're developing critical thinking skills. When did you start finding kind of like what was going to lead you into the future? Like, what did you think you were going to be when you were in high school versus what you actually went on to?
Yeah.
And when did religion also really become like a big factor in life? Because like when you're little, like you might believe in it and supportive of it, but at some point it probably actually had like a profound impact on you, and you're like, okay, I'm going to remain a religious, adult and supporter, etc.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions in there. When I was a kid, I was like, I think I wanted to be an Air Force fighter pilot. I really did. And then I was real excited. We went on our first airplane trip to Florida or something. I'm like, this is so great. And I look out the window and I watch us fly up, and I got so motion sick. Like all my dreams were just dashed immediately. Like, oh, there goes that. I'm not cut out for that. But I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up, so we can come back to that a little bit. But my relationship with Jesus was profound from day one, and it hasn't stopped. And every blessing, every success I attribute directly to his hand in my life, and just the people that are in my life. You know, true faith is when you put it in action. You don't just think about it. It's not just in your head. It's kind of like when you guys train as martial artists. There's a mindset, but if you don't actually do it, you're never going to succeed. You're never going to actually see how that works, right? And that's what true faith is you put it in action, and you take risks, and you go and you pray, and then you try something. I mean, the Lord gave us intellect. He gave us a mind. He gave us resources to, there's this whole thing. So it's always been a part of me, and Lord willing, it always will be.
There's something to the fact too of like, if you believe in those things, you have like a safety net that you can't totally fail because you still have the support of your faith.
Correct.
Whereas like, let's say you have nothing to back yourself on. You can truly feel like the lowest form of a failure. You can get lost. You can feel hopeless. You can feel empty inside. Whereas if you have that connection, right? Like I can almost compare it to like a safety net. You're willing to take the chance at what you want because you have that faith. You have that foundation.
Yes.
You believe that you're loved and cared for and worthy, right? So it creates like a safety net.
Yeah, it's a cornerstone of my life. So I've failed in things, I've made mistakes and things. Don't misunderstand. And I think there's a misunderstanding about like it's a magic potion or God's a magic genie. If you say the right words, all these things are going to happen. No, there's huge challenges. I mean, my dad passed away of Parkinson's, Lewy body Parkinson's, which is like a horrible, horrible disease. If you guys want to look it up, and he was a man of faith, and he was my mentor in my life. So it's kind of like, well, why did that happen to him? And ultimately, bad things happen regardless of what you choose. There's things that happen in life that have nothing to do with who you are as a person. They happen, and you have to choose how you're going to respond to those. And, am I mad at God? Kinda, because I wish God was a magic genie and he could just take that away. But that was going to happen to my dad, whether he was a follower of Jesus or not. And I have hope, and I'm so happy that I'm going to see my dad again. And right now he's in paradise. He's having a blast. He's partying. He doesn't have all the things he had problems with before. He's free of those things, and I have the hope that I'll see him again. So there's a peace in that. I still mourn. I still miss him. I still cry. It was still horrible. It was tragic, very horrible. So don't misunderstand, viewers. Because there's a common misconception of that. If I'm a Christian, then all these great things are going to happen to me. In fact, there's a lot of people who make a lot of money kind of spewing that health and wealth thing. If you say these things, then you're going to... we're already blessed. Just living in this country is a blessing. So it's kind of... The blessings are there. Are you going to take advantage of them? Are you going to see them? Are you going to accept them? What are you going to do with them? That's up to you, regardless of your faith, regardless of what all those things. So I just attribute my personal experiences. There's things that have happened to me that are clearly from God. It's just crystal clear. There's, coincidence after coincidence or coincidence. It's not coincidence anymore. All of my good things are because of him. And all the good things that have happened to me, I give him that glory on that honesty. And I attribute what little success I have right now to him. And taking those leaps of faith and those trusts and just going, I don't know what's going to happen, but here, just do with it with what you will, and help me, give me wisdom to see it, give me wisdom to respond correctly. And whatever you do, it all comes down to people. Whatever you do, even if you're like an engineer that works with robots, there's still another person you have to interact with, and how you treat that person and how you see that person makes all the difference. And that's what I love so much about the teachings of Jesus. He teaches us to love everybody, even your enemies, which is like so impossible to do, which kind of affirms why it's coming from God and not from man. See, you and I, we don't like our enemies. They're enemies. We want to smite our enemies. We want to kill our, I mean, war is a horrible, awful thing, and we know people who are struggling with the results of that. So the challenge that Jesus says is to love your enemies. And love isn't necessarily a touchy-feely thing. Love says, "Hey, this is something you shouldn't do, and we're gonna keep this boundary up. And if you cross it, bad things are gonna happen because of all these other people it's gonna impact." Right? Anyway, before I get rambly and preachy, it's a challenge, and you kind of need to rely on God to do things that make zero sense.
And really, I mean, in society now where you have people so divided and fighting over everything, like 2020 and 2021, you have parties just screaming at each other's face with no lines of communication,
Right.
almost like dehumanizing one another.
Correct. Very
Versus
much.
realizing like these are just human beings that were raised with, that have different opinions, that may have had access to different information, whose social media algorithm may show them a different story of the world, and now they're buying into that story. But they're people.
Yep.
They're little people that were born by other people that are trying to figure this thing out too.
Right.
And for sure, the middle ground is where we need to head towards versus continuing to march further apart.
Well, yeah, there's a huge problem when as soon as you cross that line where you see someone else as a monster, they're not a person anymore. And unfortunately, the media has discovered this can be very successful for them. So they doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on politically, and we don't need to go there, but they make a lot of money demonizing and monsterifying the other side, and we feed into it.
Well, I mean, outrage drives people. We were
Absolutely.
talking before the podcast, the limbic system is why people make most of their decisions.
Yeah.
So if you can emotionally charge them
Right.
and then say, this is the reason, now all of a sudden they want to take up the cause. Now they're fighting that bad monster. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Whereas maybe the monster's kind of like the system that you're being drugged through right now versus just being like, maybe I should have an honest conversation with that other person.
Yeah.
And see if, that's one of the things that I will shout out my martial arts for is like I have people that come in here that are the furthest left people out there, and I have people that come in here that are the furthest right people. But when they're training, they shake each other's hands. They treat each other with respect.
Right.
They do jujitsu together. They smile together. They laugh together. They interact, right, in a perfectly healthy setting.
Yeah.
Without being like, you know what our differences are? We
right,
should
right,
fight
right.
about those.
Yeah.
So like, and if it can be modeled on a small scale, it can be definitely done in a larger scale. It's just like if the media knows that they can get your money and attention and they can influence you, why wouldn't they do so?
Yeah.
You almost have to take a step back.
You do.
And be like, is it worth my outrage being controlled? Or would it be better if I put that energy into my life, into my goals, into my family, into my systems, versus giving it to these strangers that do not care about me at all?
Correct. Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. And that's what comes down to kind of the golden rule is, it's a two-parter. The first one is love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, all your strength. The second one is love your neighbor as yourself. And it's a two-parter. It's one, it's two. You really can't do one without the other. You really can't. You can try really hard to love your neighbor, and as soon as they do something that offends you, and it'll happen, right? Especially nowadays, it's really hard to see that person as a person anymore instead of a monster. Well, if you don't have, in my opinion and my experience, if you don't have a relationship with Jesus who loves you despite everything that you do, regardless of everything that I do wrong, the wrong words I say, the wrong behaviors I do, all this, he still loves me. If I don't have that, then I'm going to be the same with other people, right? And it's the other thing. A true relationship with Jesus, you realize you're not being judged. And I think a lot of people are afraid of that. God's this judge that smites you. Well, no, God loves you right now. No matter what you're doing, no matter what you don't have to change. He loves you already. He knows everything already, right? So it's a really freeing experience when you experience that. When that becomes internal, that's the born again experience. That's when you experience that. You can treat other people that way. So, when I see something and somebody does something wrong, we're called to defend the defenseless, of course. So don't misunderstand me. But what's behind that? And that's a human being, and I got to have some compassion and some awareness. Listen, I kind of grew up with this Norman Rockwell experience. Like I said earlier, the older I got, the more I realized what a blessing that was. Not everybody experiences that. Not everybody even knows who both of their parents are. Some people, and this is through my training as a psychologist, are abused by their parents chronically. That shapes you. That really impacts your worldview. So when you get into a conflict, all that stuff comes up, right? So having that awareness and that compassion can at least give me a little bit of an insight of, well, maybe, they didn't have the same experience as me going. Maybe they don't even know what love is,
Even just as you say this, the ability to take yourself out of your perspective and consider someone else and put them at the front of your thoughts and say, wow, what if this person doesn't have this story of life? What if they didn't experience these things? That's a huge thing for humanity, right? Because then, like, you're empathizing. It's almost that we have it painted on the wall out there. It says, we are all one. That's back to that, like, that's just a human being. And the other thing that I think that people need to do is you have to start with you. If you don't work, like on my Facebook, the first quote you'll ever find right at the top says, the greatest gift you have to give is that of your own self-transformation. The idea is, like, if you don't start with you first and work through the things that you have and learn how to love yourself, and then from that healthy place, interact with the world around you, it's very hard. Like if you're filled with anger, you're filled with angst, you're filled with jealousy, or you're just anything, insecurity, anxiety, etc., and then you're going to go out and try to better the world, you're filled with these negative emotions. You've got to start at home. You got to start with, like, some people that love you, or in your case, with a God that loves you, that gives you acceptance, that gives you forgiveness, that allows you to let go of the past and some of the, like, instead of being like, wow, I must be a loser because I did this, this, and this. I must be a failure because of these things. When you detach from that, say, what if I am the product of all of the experiences of my life that have brought me to this moment, and through those experiences, I can then level up to a new version of myself, and that version of myself can have a profound impact on the world. You know what I mean? And, like, we actually work with a lot of struggling youth here. I just left the court before I came here. The Livingston County Juvenile Court sends kids here that are struggling. And one of the main things I have to do with those children is make them realize they are not their past. Their past is their story. But if they can be a different human being in this moment, that if we had a time machine and we could go back to those times where you really made the wrong choices and you would do something differently, then you know what? You needed those moments. And it brought you to this existence where you're a better, healthier version of yourself that will yield a better future. So before, you and I could probably ramble about psychology and sociology and stuff all day, but I want to get to the next part of your story because you've been extremely humble and downplaying a lot of the things that I read in your resume. So after high school, did you go right into your creative times in life where you started, directing and acting? Or how did you lead into that? What point of your life did you finally go, you know what, like, because that's where your passion lies, right? Things from the heart. What made you flip a switch? Well, talk about your life right after high school, and then what was the switch that said, you know what, Brian's got to do some things that he believes in, loves, and can create?
Thanks for that question. Even through high school, I was doing things I love. Since I think the third grade was the first play I was in. I think it was second grade or third grade, and that's when I fell in love with it.
Do you remember the play?
Yeah. It was Christmas Carol. I was Tiny Tim, and I got to say the last word, which I think is really cool. And this is a public school, by the way, very different back then. I said, "God bless us, everyone." That was the end line of the whole performance, the whole play, and ever since then, I've been in music, I've been a musician, I've been an actor, I've been in commercials, blah, 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 blah. So I was always doing that through school, even through college. So in high school, we had high school plays, and it was not that big of a high school, but it wasn't tiny either. So we had a decent...
Where'd you go to high school?
Dearborn High School. It was a decent-sized, school, and we had plays, and we had a drama group and everything. And for a hot minute, I was like, I'm going to be an actor. I'm going to go to Hollywood, and I'm going to move out there. And I really was considering that out of high school. I was either going to go to Hollywood and try to make it, or I was going to go into art and try to make it being an artist, creative, visual artist.
Both extremely difficult things. So there's that profound self-belief, man.
Both are not, traditional, yes, go do that kind of a thing. And my parents were pretty cool about it still. They're like, if that's what you want to do, if that's what you're passionate about, we'll support you. Which is, again, another huge gift. Although,
shout out to the parents.
Yeah,
shout out.
I know, right?
100%. That type of foundation in life. You want your kids to be successful, make sure you let them know that you want them to be successful. Not through your words,
correct.
Through your actions.
Through your actions. Yeah, and that's what it is, through their actions. And, my mom always wanted me to be a doctor, that makes sense.
I feel like every single person that grew up the older generation, you're a doctor or a lawyer, or that's what we were all
I know, right? Because that's the most lucrative professions. And this is the funny thing. You mentioned these are gaming chairs. When I was growing up, so I was born in 72. In 70 something, Atari 2600 came out, which is the original home console video game. And of course, we got it for Christmas, and that's like all I wanted to do. So growing up, everybody in my generation will know this. Their parents were always telling them, "You can't do that when you grow up. You got to stop doing it." And they were right. At the time, there was nothing. But now I'm like, these people make millions of dollars being professional gamers. It's hilarious.
There was a kid from Brighton. His online thing is Nick Merckx, right? His father is Kevin Coldchef. Actually, his mom trains here right now.
Yeah.
He's making like $3 to $5 million a year playing Call of Duty.
That's what I'm saying.
He's the number one. All he does
It's crazy.
play Call of Duty and get sponsorships. And people, like, I've seen some of his streams have 100,000 viewers live.
It's insane.
All he does is he's got an awesome personality. He's a cool kid. People watch him play video games, and he makes millions of dollars.
It's unbelievable. I'm so jealous.
We missed the boat.
You kids.
Yes.
We missed the boat. But I wouldn't change anything for the world. But it's just that irony of like, just be a doctor. Well, now you can say, I want you to be a player. There's so much discipline in it. It's not just playing. Obviously, he's got to have mad skills to be at that level, like mad, crazy skills. So respect and props to him.
100%. Nick's one of the best in the world. Like, I mean, he was breaking world records in games. So he's incredibly skilled. And like when I was talking to his father about it, it was priceless because the dad he admitted to me, he was basically like, I was always like, get off the game, like, get a job, you bum.
Right?
You know what I mean? And now it's like his kid is one of the most successful people to ever come out of Brighton playing video games.
I know, right? It's so awesome. I love it. I just think it's brilliant, Anyway, so I was always doing fun stuff and things
so
I loved.
I'm still hooked on the story where you were either going to Hollywood or you're going into art.
I at the time I'm like, I didn't really want to go to California. I didn't want to leave my family and leave everything behind and try to do that. So I went the quote unquote safer route. Not that it's any safer. Of going down the visual arts. So I took it was Henry Ford Community College was my first year, and then I went to Center for Creative Studies in Detroit, which I think is called College of Creative Studies now. And I love cars. So I'm gonna be an automotive stylist. I'm gonna be a designer. And that was the hardest thing I ever had to do at that school. It was incredibly cutthroat, incredibly difficult. I was only taking 9.5 credits. But that was like 55 hours of homework every week. I mean, when you go to a traditional school, you have to read the books and stuff. We had to write the books and then study the books. Essentially, it's the analogy I came up with. So that was really difficult, and I realized that year was really hard. I guess it was a dose of reality. Like, this is going to be a really difficult thing for me to do. A lot of politics, a lot of hard work. I don't mind the hard work, but the politics and the chances and the grid that they put you, and they told you from day one, this is going to be the hardest thing you ever do. We're going to put you through the grid, and if you make it through here, you'll be able to make it. And they do it on purpose, right? Which is like, okay, cool. But I realized that year, I'm like, I don't know if I really want to have this level of stress for the rest of my life. That's not something that I really would like to do, even if it was a great paycheck or whatever. It took the enjoyment out of what I was doing. So I was like, I don't think I want to do that. So I went back to studio art, and that's when I started to realize that I really love people, and I have great relationships, and I'm a good listener. And so I'm like, I think I'll do psychology. I can always draw. I can always act. I can always do the things I love to do. So that's kind of the path I took, and I ended up getting a bachelor's in psychology from MSU. And then I went to a behavioral school home where I worked with children from the ages 6 to 12 in a behavioral home that they were either court ordered or they had no place else to live. Essentially, it was a foster care home, but it was behavioral, so they had things that they worked on, and I was the implementer of some of their therapies. And that was so heartbreaking. That was like huge eye-opener to me. These are 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old, 12-year-old kids who have been chronically sexually abused, who've been beat up, who've been neglected, who've been forced into drugs. 6 years old. It was the hardest thing that I ever did in my life at that point. It was so heartbreaking. So these kids, man, it was rough. They knew nothing but anger, rage, terror, hurt. That's all they knew. So we were mentoring them out of that world and giving them a new experience of life. And that's when I realized how much power there is in mentoring people and the gifts that I've been given. I want to give that back. I want to show people what you experienced is not the way it's supposed to be. And So then I decided to go at a master's level and continue that so that I could be an implementer, not just a kind of glorified babysitter, which is what I was at the time. And while I went to Wheaton College for that, I continued to do the music. That's when I would continue to do taekwondo. I continued to do the acting. And long story short, coming out of that, I had a crossroads moment in my life where I had a job offer to continue that line as essentially a behavioral therapist for children I think it was in Ann Arbor. And then at the church I was going to at the time was looking for a program director. And I'm like, well, what's a program director? Like, well, basically there's someone who, writes the dramas, runs the audio, sings the songs, leads the worship, and doing all the things that you're already doing, Brian. And I'm like, hey, that's a thing? Like, you'd pay me for that? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, what? That's amazing. So when I was growing up, there were very few churches that did arts-focused programming, essentially. So they'd, do a hymn, and they'd do a sermon, and that was about it. Now there's a lot of churches that do, contemporary music. They do dramas. They use videos. They talk about real things, not just Scripture, but how does Scripture relate to real life? So that's the kind of church I was seeking out. And I'm like, hey, I'm here. Let's do music. I'll act. Whatever you guys need to do. And then it turns out there's a thing that you can do and actually get paid for it. So the crossroads were the behavioral place made me a job offer, the church made me a job offer, and ironically, the church offered me more money, which is like, okay, I guess I'm going to go this direction now. And that's what I did. And so I led a couple churches over the last 10, 15 years, just doing just that, using all of those skills. The people skills are obviously there because you're working with people when you're at a church. That's kind of the most important thing about a church is the people. So I guess it wasn't really a switch, but it was a crossroads that was presented to me. I prayed about it. I talked with my parents about it. It wasn't like, oh, this is great. It was, what's the best thing for me to do right now? And that was it.
And I feel like that style is almost necessary to connect with the younger generation now, because a lot of churches are turning into they're like performance centers where you're invoking a ton of emotion. You are getting people all together as community. You're making them feel a part of something. Mm-hmm. You're making them feel good. Mm-hmm. So like maybe the rest of their life is chaos. Maybe the rest of their life is completely upside down. But for a moment in time, together with other human beings, they're in a very good energy, and that can lead to profound change.
Huge.
You know what I mean? Like for me, I had the same experience with jiu-jitsu. I had a very tough life at a certain point in time dealing with a lot of things, but for like this super small window while I was doing jiu-jitsu, none of that stuff existed. I was just in the moment. Yep. And through that, being in the moment and finding something that I thoroughly enjoyed, that I started to gain some competence in and then better, it helped pull me out of a really dark place. So being able to connect with people like that versus like, I couldn't even imagine trying to run a church like rigid scripture nowadays. Like everyone sits silently in the pews and we're going to read this book written in language that most of you won't even comprehend nowadays. Right. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like you have to find ways to innovatively connect with human beings. And we have a couple different church members here. We have like one of the lead pastors for 242 that trains here. We have I don't call Floodgate.
Okay. Yep.
One of the leading women from Floodgate, Natalie Furlong, is here. And I like to speak to them a little bit. Like, how do you really connect with this younger generation that is like living through a screen that like is like, hey, I don't really care what you have to say about, what God thinks or not. And I think a lot of it is now getting like just bringing people together. And then instead of taking it for the direct words out of the book, showing how that correlates to your current struggles and your problems and how you could reflect on things differently with a little bit of wisdom that is being taken from these pages, so you get in with the church. You're shocked that, first of all, you're getting a higher salary with the church. You're like, wait a second, this is crazy.
That tells you how low the salary was. Because it wasn't a big salary.
I was going to say, it either says how low or the church was killing it. Yeah. One of the two. But so then you go in there, and now do they give you like freedom to create, and that's where your creative side starts coming out? Because I read all the way up to the fact that you put on like the play in Bright, which I don't want to spoil your story.
Oh, yeah, no, it's totally fine.
So much of your creative energy was probably unleashed at that point because it's like, hey, you're the director here. You're in charge of this. How does that start to, what does that make your life look like? And then how long did you stay into that before you turn a chapter to the next page?
Yeah, that's, it was a little bit of unleashing, but like I said, I was already doing that anyway. So now it was like, instead of doing it on the side, now that's what I did for full time. So it was a refreshing pivot, I guess, if you want to call it that. So it was an opportunity really, to express all of that creativity for the glory of God. And to me, that's the best expression of any creativity, is to give glory to God. He's the ultimate creator. He's the ultimate artist, and a lot of people don't see him that way. But I mean, anything that we have in our existence is from him. I mean, we don't even know how small things get still. We don't even know how far out the universe gets. We don't know yet.
And if you think you do, go back 100 years and they
Exactly.
thought they knew. And then go back another 100 years, they thought they knew.
Exactly. I personally think we're never going to find the bottom. We're never going to find it. I think that's how incredibly infinite the creativity of our Creator is.
I love reading about science, and I read it was probably about 2 years ago. They found a new galaxy that is 14.2 billion light years away.
How do you even measure that? It's beyond me, right?
So you have to travel at the speed of light.
Right.
For 1 billion years
it's insane.
to reach this object that they've now identified. Yeah. That is
insane.
So far beyond human comprehension.
Yeah, I can't comprehend it.
I would agree with you that I doubt we will ever actually have a grasp on what this thing really is. But that's some of the magnificence of it is just how grand it is.
It absolutely is. And I always had a pet peeve of growing up, the church was kind of lame, to be honest. Like, you're worshiping the most creative God. And like, what? How does that line up? So I had this kind of pet peeve about it. So now is my opportunity to counter that and express it and to bring glory to God in creative ways. And Jesus was the ultimate teacher. He was the ultimate storyteller. And what he would do is he would bring a cultural truth, whatever that is, a cultural event that everybody knew was going on. So whatever that cultural event was, and he'd bring a kingdom truth alongside of that. And then he'd leave people with that kingdom truth. And that engagement right here is what matters. This is relevant, and it's relevant to our lives today. So it's a blast to take things like that and bring along, oh my gosh, and you give people an awareness of this, and you leave them with that. And what they do with that's up to them. And that's, again, that's up to them and how the Lord wants to work with that person in their life. So the fun part about it was, what song are we going to sing? What drama can we create? What movie clip can we use? And how would that all work with this one thing that we want to leave them with? So it was a blast, and I loved it. And it was exhausting. And after 10 years or so, the church I was at, one of the churches I was at, I finally call it, every 1 year there was like 7 years at another church. I mean, the pace was insane. And it was awesome. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I learned so much. I met so many awesome people. That burned me out, so I had to take a pause from that. And that's when I started to do all these things I was doing on the side as a freelancer. The movie stuff, filming, performing, creating, whatever, graphics, websites, videos, photography, all that stuff. I kind of do that on the side because, like I said, I was working for a church. So you don't make a lot of money working for a church usually. Some churches, when they're big and they have great budgets because they've been around for 30, 40 years, then you can make a career out of it. That's great. But all the churches I was at, they were startups. So I wasn't in a position to get to that point. So I started freelancing on the side. When I got burned out, that was kind of my go-to then. I could do these things for my own revenue instead of doing it for another place. And then I got a quote-unquote real job at a great place. It was an awesome physical therapy place. They had, I think before they sold to a bigger fish, they had 33 clinics across the state. They were huge. It's the best job, quote-unquote, I had. So I was working for someone else. It was a big company. The people were awesome. I met them at the church I was at. The owners were at the church. And they gave me a great position, autonomy, creativity. I was basically branding and marketing for them. And when they sold to a bigger fish, I knew my days were limited because this fish already had all of that ready to go, and they were like national. They had, they were in like 25 states or something at that point. I think they're in all 50 now. So I knew my days were limited, and I couldn't find a job for working for another place that would keep that level of income for my family. At this point, I was married, had two little ones, a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and I got the proverbial pink slip one day from the big company. They did a mass layoff one day, 4:30 p.m. on a Friday. Hey, so everything's done at 5 p.m. All of your insurance is done, your pay is done. You got 30 minutes to clear out your desk. That was like the worst feeling ever. And they did that to the former owner too. I mean, it wasn't like I was the only one. I mean, they did this to a bunch of people. I knew it was coming, but still, when it comes, it ain't pretty. And it was a dark time for us as a family. So trying to find income during that it wasn't happening. So I was on unemployment, and unemployment wasn't happening.
What timeline is this? Like, how long ago
This
How old are you?
is about 10-ish years ago now. So this is maybe, it was 7 years into my freelancing. So
Right around like the 08-09 financial crisis?
it was
or-
after that, I think. I don't. It's a good question. I don't know. I have to really think about it. I don't remember if it was before. I think it was after. It was after that 2008 thing. Thank goodness. That would have been really
I was
bad.
gonna say, if that happened to line up with the time that I remember everything was tanking, especially in Michigan.
Yeah, that would have been real rough.
A little bit after that.
Yeah, it was a little bit after that. So long story short, it was a prayerful decision. It was a point where I was like, I just got to make this full time. I got to do this full time.
Now, does your wife work? Is she working during this time, or is she taking care of the kids?
No, she was mostly taking care of the kids. She's a ballet teacher, so she was doing some. She's teaching for a couple of places, but it wasn't like, it was just offsetting a little bit, helping us with our revenue.
She didn't teach at Michelle's Academy of Dance, did she?
She didn't, but she does now. Just as the first year.
Our last building, so we're here now.
Yeah.
We were next to Michelle's
Oh,
Academy
really?
of Dance for
Oh,
2
cool.
years.
Yeah.
So how wild would that have been if she was teaching
Yeah.
next door?
No, she wasn't. She just started this year with them. But at the time, she was working for a couple places, and I was the primary breadwinner, and we did that by design. It wasn't by accident. That's
No,
something.
I'm trying to
Yeah.
envision myself in your situation. You're out of this spot now.
Yeah.
You're trying to find what's next. You have all these creative skills, and you're doing some freelance work.
Right.
But still, it's like when you get let go of anything, the unknown usually torments people. Like,
Yeah,
what
and
is next?
That was our primary source of income, and that was where we got our health care through, and insurance, all that stuff. Stuff that you need. So that was a dark time, and then coming out of that was a slow process. It wasn't a switch that happened. I mean, I went, okay, I'm not finding anything. Unemployment's terrible. It wasn't even working. I didn't get a check from them for like 2 months. We had support. We had her family, my family. They were helping us through this. But long story short is when I made that final step where I just thought to myself, and this is prayerfully considered with, talking with my parents and even trying to convince my wife of this, was I don't want to put us in a situation again where something like that can happen. As much as it's possible, I don't want to be in that position again where someone comes away and says, oh, everything's gone like that. No, thank you, right? So stepping into doing this full time was a huge, massive challenge. I'm not a business person. I'm a creative person. So learning the business side of it was a huge challenge. Huge. And it wasn't pretty.
And man, we're not taught any of these things in school. I talk to people about this
No.
all the time. We're not really taught accounting or
Nope.
business or how to do these
Unless
things.
that's what you did.
100%. Unless
yeah.
you went for it,
Right.
you're going to be bewildered by
Yes.
it. And you almost have to blunder into it
Yeah.
and then be like, oh my God, I'm a mess. And then you have to slowly, but I was the same way because I was just a martial artist that loved jujitsu and loved fighting.
Yeah. So you know
And
what
then
I'm
it's
talking
like,
about.
I have to run a business out of this.
Yeah.
I have to keep books. Like my accountant, the first time I got an accountant, looked at me and was kind of like, hey, he basically laughed in my face about like, dude, you're just winging this thing, aren't you? And I was like, 100%. But we're not taught these things, man.
Right.
It's really easy to be an employee. It is very difficult to take a jump, no matter how skilled you are,
Right.
into like, you know what, I'm gonna be the captain of this ship. So like, I respect people that make that jump. And your wife being there supporting that is essential.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because she could have compounded her fears onto you and then made you like, oh, you know what? I shouldn't do this. I got to just get
Yeah.
this job.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
you
yeah.
obviously had enough support and belief in yourself and in your higher power to say, you know what? I'm going to take a shot at it so that I'm not that 4:30 p.m. on a Friday. Studies show that that's the best time to let go of people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just crazy how they can cut people cold like that. But,
Yeah. It was rough.
you know what I mean? So you start, what was the first step? Did you open a business? Did you describe that? Because I think this is an inspirational part of the podcast for
Yeah.
people.
So when I did the freelancing thing, at first I just did it on the side, and then I realized, hey, I should probably make it an LLC. So I made it an LLC, which cost like $20. I mean, it was just a little bit. Thank goodness for Google. It was a little bit of Google search, right? Oh, how to get it? Okay, great. So I went to the accounting clerk.
Articles of organization?
Yeah, I don't even think I did that for like 2 years. But I made it an LLC, and it was a terrible name. It was called EMT Productions. Terrible name. EMETH. So the problem with that name is nobody knows what it is. You can't even pronounce it right, and you say it over the phone. It sounds like what? And I had this terrible name. The name was inspired from a character from the Chronicles of Narnia books by C.S. Lewis. Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. Everybody's heard of Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe. Well, there's 7 books in that series. The last one is called The Last Battle, and there's a character in there whose name is Emeth, E-M-E-T-H. I think that's how you pronounce it. Maybe it's Emeth. Anyway, it means truth in Hebrew. And that character in particular was one of the bad guys who was told his whole life that Aslan was evil. And then when he has an encounter with Aslan, he realizes Aslan is not evil. Aslan is the opposite of evil, and he's been lied to his whole life. So he has this encounter, and Aslan is essentially God. So he has this encounter with God. He finds the true God, and he ends up going, that's what I want. That's what I've been seeking my whole life. So it's a great name with a great story, but it's a terrible business name.
But unless you can sit down and get people to listen to that little pitch right there, they're like, what is this?
What is it? What do you do? You know, so it's legally, it's still that, but the doing business as, which is a DBA, is a Michigan Video and Photography. That makes perfect sense.
And instantly you take the power of the word Michigan and so if I Googled something, I saw Michigan Video and Photography.
Right.
Oh, sweet. That's high level.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's credibility.
Branding like you did before.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because Michigan already has credibility.
Yep.
This is the Michigan Institute of Athletics.
Exactly.
Not Emeth's. You know what I mean?
Right,
Even though
right.
in my mind, that might be an extremely powerful name because it relates to a feeling that I have in a story.
Right.
We have to hit the general audience that doesn't get to know that.
Yes,
I get it.
And that's a business lesson I had to learn after a couple years of trying again and again, telling people how to spell it. Like my email, Brian at EMT Productions, E-M-E-T-H, T is in there, H is in here, with an S at the end. I was like, this is a terrible.
Remember that.
Yeah,
now they got to go home.
They're never going to
And
remember
after
it.
all these conversations, they have to remember your
Never.
thing. It's got to be so like the Nike swoosh. The best advertisements, like
Simple.
the golden arches.
Exactly.
You know.
Yeah. So I had to learn that, and I had to emotionally detach myself from my name that I made because of all this great reason. So that was a lesson. Took a couple years. I'm sorry. What was the original question? Because now we're going down this.
I just wanted to hear this part of your life because I think it's
Yeah.
a pivotal moment when people decide to branch out on their own and follow their intuition and dreams.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and a lot of people probably have goals or things or talents that they have that they believe there might be the ability to make that their living, but they're like scared to make that jump.
Oh yeah,
So
it's scary.
It must have been your faith in your religious beliefs. It must have been your family supportive system, and you knew you were competent enough that like, I know I'm valuable. I just have to get in front of the right audiences, right? So you had to have the actual skills. You had to have some form of a support system, and you had to have the belief that it was possible for you.
Yes.
So then when you first venture out into this, did you find success quicker than you thought, or was it a difficult path, or were the connections that you had made previously vital to you actually finding the success?
Yes, 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 and yes to all of that. The most important thing was my faith. The second most important thing was my support. I had to have that support. The skills can come, but I had already had those. It wasn't like it was a brand new thing I was doing. Everything that I've been doing for the last 10 years, I was just doing it for me instead of a church or a company or whatever. So the skills were there, but it's the belief and the confidence that's so critical. I can't stress that enough. If a wise man once said, whether you think you can or cannot, you're right. And
That's on the plaque outside of the
Henry
store.
Ford.
It's literally, there's a plaque that's Henry Ford's thing is right outside of the store.
It's perfectly 100% true. So if you think you're not going to be able to do it, you're not. You're going to find all these excuses, and whenever a challenge comes up, you're going to be like, oh, there it is. But if you think you can, you'll be like, I can take that. Or what's the solution there? Oh my gosh, I need help. Let me call so-and-so. Let me call, oh my gosh, let me pray. Whatever it was. And I got to tell you, in truth, my wife wasn't really fully on board with this. Her upbringing wasn't as creative as mine. So she's very much in the box. You know, like, you need to get a job.
Get a job.
Get a job. That's
Get
like,
a paycheck.
you know, that's the thing. Get a job. I'm like, that's not working. It didn't work. I don't want to put us in that position again. So she believed in me enough to at least let me try, you know. So the success, it's still coming. It's still a struggle. It's a journey. It's not like a switch went off and here I am and I have all that and I've arrived. No, it's still a journey. It's still a challenge. But getting the revenue came-ish. You know, I got a couple leads and I got a couple accounts coming in, so I could build from that. But the hardest part was I had to deliver, and it had to be good. It had to be my best work. It couldn't have been something that I kind of did. It would have every single time. It has to be my best work. It still has to be my best work, and it's a huge challenge to do that. And then while you're producing, you still have to generate revenue. You still have to keep those relationships. So the ultimate challenge that I have right now is keeping the relationships, keeping the funnel, if you will, the sales funnel, people who are interested in my services, keeping them interested, telling them what value I can bring them while producing at the same time. And both are very timely. They take a lot of time and a lot of energy. And just before COVID hit, I was at a point where I was just about ready to bring some people on full time, right? And that's when I would reach the next level. So I have a team of people full time that could do the producing while I keep the relationships going. Well, COVID obviously changed everything for everybody. So I'm still I'm getting back to that point, and Lord willing, I'll reach that in the next couple of years.
And there's something about when you actually do shift to working for yourself or on your own projects, you're willing to go that extra mile and really pour every bit of your soul or passion into it versus like when you're working for a job, the worst feeling ever is when you give 1,000% and you see nothing extra than when you give 80%.
Right.
You know what I mean? When you're not being utilized, and it's like, then all of a sudden you just get like this feeling of like, well, it doesn't even really matter. I just have to do enough. But when you take that leap out, because I know the exact leap you're talking about.
Yeah.
You know what?
Clearly.
You're like, I have to go 1,000%. Yeah. And the funny thing is, I always joke and tell my fighters this, like what I thought 5 years ago, my 100% was like, I am giving you, because you'll lie to yourself. Like I am really doing 100%. That now is 30% in my mind of what I can actually handle. Yeah. But like when you get yourself out there and you level up and you create even more discipline within yourself and your routines and keeping checklists and keeping goals and self-reflection, then you go, you know what? I'm capable of even more.
Yeah, but you have to learn it. And you have to take the risk. 'Cause again, if you think you're right, or if you think you can or you cannot. If you think you can, you're going to take those risks. You're going to take that challenge. A lot of times I just had to say yes and then figure it out after I said yes.
If you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful quote. And the beauty is in the simplicity of that quote. Because it really is like that. It goes down to a deep internal belief that you have for yourself. Because if you do believe something is possible, there is a way to do it. People with far less than you have achieved far more. Same with me, same with, you know what I mean? So if you know that like there is a way and you're willing to give every bit of yourself, it's possible.
It's absolutely possible.
And those words, I can't tell you, I have taken more inspiration from the simple two words. I used to say to myself all the time, like when I was training people in a friggin' basement, saying one day, like UFC fighters are going to come to Brighton, Michigan. People are going to travel from all over the world to come here. We're going to have people competing on ESPN. It was so delusional when I was a kid teaching in a basement, but I kept saying to myself, like, it's possible that future will exist, and I will give 1,000,000% of myself to try to create that. And now when I sit on the other side of it, it allows me to see people that are dreamers or believers or these young kids, the same way that you talked about how influential the mentorship part of your life was. That's how it is for me, and that's why I want to work with these young kids, because I remember being them. I remember being the kid that just had an outlandish dream that society would have trampled me. If I would have talked to most strangers and been like, I'm a self-taught martial artist that's going to start a team and bring UFC fighters here and we're going to travel around the world, they'd have been like, good luck, kid.
Yeah, sure, kid.
Good luck.
Get a job.
When you fail, you can always go get a job.
Yeah, get a job.
100%. That like, get a job, I get it. And most people that do that, it is based in their mind and like we want the good for you. Like, so just get a job. Like, you don't have to worry. But really, it is like crushing to the people that are dreamers, because you're like, no, I have vision. And if I don't live in that spirit, I'm going to disappoint myself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'll tell you a really quick, brief story before we go to another part of yours. I worked at the dealership, Champion Chevrolet, right up the road. And I had this dream that I was going to start a martial arts team and we were going to be ultra successful and da-da-da-da. And, I was laying in bed, or it's actually laying on the couch, as embarrassing this is. I fell asleep on my couch after training one night. I wake up, it's like 3:17 in the morning on like a Tuesday, and I was like super unhappy. And I'm like, why am I unhappy? Like, I was making like $65,000, $70,000 a year in like early 20s. Nice. I owned my own house. Like, I bought my house. I had a Mustang Cobra. I had a crotch rocket. I had a 72-inch TV in my bedroom. Nice. And all the materialistic things. Yeah. I had a house. But yet I still had a deep feeling of like, you're not doing the right thing right now. And I was like, what the hell's going on? And I'm very big on like analyzing my thoughts. I always have been. I'm like, what the hell's going on? And then I realized like, you do not care at all about your desk job to the tiniest degree. You work 72 hours a week, sitting behind a desk, having these conversations with zero depth, with the same, just insert random monkey across from me, like, how's your day? How's the weather? Blah, blah, blah. It was so meaningless to me as a very passionate person. And it was like, you need to take a shot at your dream or you're going to regret this for the rest of your life. And the funny thing is, it was like, I'm not religious, but I am not anti-religious in any way. But it was almost like this idea imprinted from the universe. And the next morning I woke up, it was like a light switch had flipped and I could never turn that light switch. Like I walked in my boss the next day, almost like I was seeing the room for the first time. And I was like, I'm not meant to be
like,
here.
What am I doing?
No, literally, I'm not meant to be here. I'm not meant to sit in that desk and give my life to this corporation that like doesn't really care about me at all. Like I'm a number. As soon as I stop producing, I'll be gone, just like you were. I'll be gone. And I picked up a business card, and this is the powerful moment that I was getting to. And I looked at it, and it said James Gray Jr. Service Advisor, and I was like, holy crap! Like this identity that I've created is going away. Like this is gone now. Like this is what I was starting to go down a path towards. And I turned the card over, right? And this is, again, not an anti-religious quote. It's going to sound like that, but it's not. But I wrote on the card, hell is not a place you go if you're not a Christian. It's the failure of your life's greatest ambition. And it was like, the only thing I don't want in this lifetime is to look back at the end of it and realize that like I could have been someone that really made an impact, that followed my passions, that chased my dreams, that influenced community and people, and I didn't do that. You know what I mean? And
what does it say now?
Yeah, look at that. James David Gray, founder, CEO, the Michigan Institute of Athletics. And you know what? You're lucky I don't have my wallet's out in the car right now. Or I was just saying, I've never shown anyone that business card.
Oh,
but I still in my wallet to this day, hidden in the back. If you pull it out, it's right there. And I had read a quote that was extremely similar that said, "The only hell in life is meeting the person you could have become." And those things hit me, man. And as a passionate person like you, it was so funny. I walked to my boss's office and I'm like, "Hey, man, I'm going to put in my 2 weeks." And he's like, "What?"
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about? You're early 20s. You're making $6,000 a month. Like, what? And I was like,
yeah, this is a little crazy, right?
Doesn't matter. The money to me is so irrelevant. If I don't give a shot at what I love in this life, to me, that is failing.
Yeah.
That is failing to realize that you have purpose and not follow it. So I completely understand that shift, that jump, battling fears, learning about a business. Like I did the same thing you do. How to start business.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Something popped up and it was like, oh, you need to file your articles of organization. I'm like, what are articles of organization?
The heck is that?
But you make your way through it.
Absolutely.
And if you have passion, you have drive, you can do these things. So pre-COVID, you really start crushing it. Your brand is doing well. Your DBA is what people are knowing you as. Michigan Videography and Photography.
Video and photography.
Video and photography. So you're doing really well there. Let's talk right before we talk about the post-COVID transition about some of the biggest works that you produced or things, because I was reading some of the like movie things that you had done, and it's really awesome. You know what I mean? It shows that like you're not just a guy that's like, oh, I'm going to take a shot at this. You are producing results. You are starting to have an impact. You're starting to see your work, your creations in the world, which like probably inspires you to like go to that next level. Now, if I did this, can I do that?
Right.
So let's talk about some of the big successes that started to make you realize like, hey man, this thing is working. And then what was COVID like for you guys when the whole world shut down?
Yeah. Just a couple highlights that were really memorable. One that I'm super proud of is I directed the high school play at Hartland High School, Les Mis, student edition. Now, Les Mis is, I think, arguably the second most popular Broadway play in the world. Phantom of the Opera is number one. At least it was at the time. I don't know if it's changed or not. It may or may not have. But at the time, I wanted to do Phantom of the Opera, but I knew the kids pretty well. We didn't have quite the cast to do that. So Les Mis was the best option. And it was just a phenomenal experience. It was just so cool. You know, most of the kids were like, there's no way we're going to be able to do this. You know, it was that whole journey of bringing the kids to new places that they didn't think they could go. And that's what made it so successful. And they loved it, and they put their heart and soul into it, because I put my heart and soul into it. And the parents put their heart and soul into it. And we had 50 kids in the cast and crew. I can't remember what the breakdown was. It was like 50 cast, 50 crew. It was a lot. It was a big thing. It wasn't like a small thing. It was a big thing, and it was awesome. And it was just so fulfilling to see them succeed. And it was a huge, anybody in the performance industry knows any performance is a huge bonding experience. Music, whatever it is. They really bonded, and we really bonded. It was phenomenal. It was a pivotal moment for me. I'll never forget it, Lord willing. I'll never forget it. So that was really cool. And the cool thing was unsolicited, the irony, I was like, really? This kind of, God has a sense of humor. I'm like, God, really? Really? So at the same weekend we're doing our play, Les Mis, guess who's at the Fox Theater? Les Mis. The professional one at Les Mis. Same weekend. Like, really? How does that happen? That's a sense of humor. You couldn't have planned that. Anyway, unsolicited, we had some people come and tell us they saw both shows and they liked our show better because of the passion. And I was like, that's awesome. What a great gift to have, that someone would actually tell you that. So that was really cool. On a personal note, one of my pinnacle moments as a personal actor was it's a terrible movie, by the way. It's called American Virgin. Rob Schneider wrote it. Yeah. He wrote it. I never met him, but it was a full-scale Hollywood production, and that was the time where we had the film incentives at Michigan. So all the Hollywood productions were coming to Michigan to film. That was one of them. I got cast as a drunk guy, which is really hilarious because I'm not a drunk guy. I don't drink. I mean, I do, but I never got drunk. I've never been drunk. And so it was kind of a funny story to tell that to the director. She's like, huh? I'm like, yeah, I've never been drunk. But you're what? And that was my role. My role is to be a drunk guy. So it was a one-on-one scene with Jenna Dewan, who's at the time was engaged to Channing, I think that's his name. Channing
Tatum.
Yes, I always get his name mixed up. Apparently they're divorced now, but at the time they were fiancés. And so I got to meet her, and we had a one-on-one scene together. And this is like the trashiest movie ever. So she's on revenge. The whole arc of the story, not to be a spoiler alert or anything, she's a virgin, and she's in this virgin club at college, and the president of the virgin club cheats on her with her boyfriend and has sex with her boyfriend. So she's betrayed by this, right? So she's on revenge. She wants to get laid. She's on a revenge thing. So she goes to this bar and she hits on all these guys to try to get hooked up. And I'm like the third guy she hooks up with. The first guy's, he's like, yeah, and he's like gay. And she's like, oh, dang it. And I don't remember what the other one. Anyway, she comes to me and she gives me this dream line, right? You can put yourself in like 7th grade, 8th grade, because that's the kind of level of movie it is. She's like, look, I just want one night of hot and sweaty sex. No strings attached, no emotional. Are you in? And I'm like, yeah, baby. And I pass out. Like hilarious, right? And so the coolest thing is they had a trailer for me with my name on it when I showed up on set 3 hours early. So there was my name with a star and I had a trailer. So I had to wait there until they called me on set. So they called me into makeup, so I got makeup. And then they called me on set. Someone ushered me onto set. It was a closed set. This was like in downtown Detroit. And there's gear everywhere, and there's trucks everywhere, and you walk in this bar, and there's lights everywhere, and there's 50 extras behind us, and there's this lighting crew, and there's this audio crew, and there's a director, and she's like, hey, come on. And what I was doing at the time is I was in character, so I thought I was going to have fun with this. So I'm like kind of stumbling around, and one of some guy's like, who's that guy? Get him off the set. He goes, well, that's actually the guy. And I go, hey, nice to meet you. And he's like, all right. He shakes my hand. Anyway, so the director talks with me, and the thing about a Hollywood movie, the Hollywood set, is it takes hours and hours to do one shot. There's lighting, there's sound, there's the camera angle, there's what's going on behind you, blah, 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 blah. So we had to do this scene from my point of view and then from her point of view. So the first one was her point of view. So she's here and the camera's behind her and facing me. And we must have done my line 20 times. So the whole time, and the director she's like, okay, try this. And one time I'm just like picking my ear the whole time, and I look at I'm like, yeah, baby. And I'm talking to my pinky. Just the funniest thing is they're just trying to find all these things that they might use. And then so you go off set and you come back on when they're ready for the next shot. And then it's from my perspective talking to, looking at her. So I got a real full experience. And Jenna Dewan was awesome. She was super cool. It was a little bonding experience for us. And it was just this pivot. I didn't want to leave the set.
I was going to say, what a massive moment.
I didn't want to leave.
Someone that's been engaged in this type
oh
of
my
stuff
gosh.
And that young kid that had a dream, like,
Dude.
do I move to Hollywood? And now you're on set.
Right. It was
It'd be like a kid that loved football his whole life that wanted to be in the NHL. You get to practice one day with the Lions. You get to go out on the field with them and that's incredible.
Well, you get to be in the game with them.
No, yeah, you're gonna literally be out there on the field with them playing.
Yeah. So it was the real deal. I didn't want to leave. It was like a 4-hour experience. I'm like, I could do this for the rest of my life. This is so cool. Super cool people, right? And we're all there together. And I'm learning the whole time. I'm looking at what the set, I'm like soaking all this in like a sponge. And I didn't want it to end. And you never know. Obviously, you never know when it comes to this stuff if it's going to make the cutting room floor or not. But it's in the movie, and it was actually there, so that the scene's actually still there. And
Everybody, make sure you go and check it out. I'm going to.
yeah, it's just a one-liner. Yeah, baby, that's it. But I'll take it. It was a phenomenal experience, and I was so thrilled, and I was so happy.
Now, what makes them at such an elite level versus everybody else? Because, like, what comes out of Hollywood, their production is just unrivaled.
Oh, it's stunning. Yep.
But because you were there with an expert eye. I mean, not an expert to that degree, but you can look around and look at the lighting setup, audio setup, how they're shooting this, what angle, how they're doing the takes.
Oh, yeah.
What is it that makes them so elite at their craft?
It's that everybody who's doing it is so good at their craft. I mean, everybody there. So there's like a lighting director who knows exactly what he or she wants to see, and he has a team of people who can execute it. It's not just one person. So, this is white. So often when they do a close-up on an actor, they got these lights, but they'll also have reflectors that reflect secondarily. And just out of frame, there's like 5 people with these foam core things that are angling the light just at the right time, everybody has to work together so tightly so that the actor can deliver exactly the way the director wants it, right? And then there's some collaboration, but it's a huge team. So whenever you see a movie, even if it's the Marvel movies that do a lot of green screen, they're phenomenal. What they do is phenomenal. It's a huge team of people all collaborating with the same vision to make that one, and it's one moment. It's one moment. It's like, 10 seconds.
The budgets are through the roof.
And that's why
it takes such a massive, group of people, all experts within that craft, blending their skills together to give you that execution for the Hollywood
It's
cinema.
just for that one moment, for that one scene. And that's not even editing. That's just the live thing. But when you go back and edit, you have to edit a story together. So, yeah, it's phenomenal. So it was an amazing experience.
Now, your company, what part do you specialize in, or do you do a little bit of everything? Because as I've been listening to talk, it sounds like you've got editing skills, you've got photo skills, you've got video skill.
Right.
Or do you have like an all-encompassing brand that like people could reach out to you for anything, or do you say you specialize in a certain area?
It's a little bit of both. Probably 65% of what I do is video production, and all of it. I'll write it, I'll direct it, I can be in it, I can be on camera if I need to, but I like to bring people to life, and then edit it and shoot it. Everything. It's a huge skill set that I've developed for the last 10, 15 years. And then, yes, I do websites, I do photography, I do graphic design, but I do a lot of live event production too. The whole thing. Again, write the whole experience, direct the whole experience, or be in any part, stage design, lighting, anything, you name it. It's a skill set. It's a passion of mine, and I love it, and I love doing it. And when you can get somebody who, and most people don't like to be on camera. I don't know if you've discovered that or not. And when you ask people to be on podcasts, they're like, "Yeah, I can do it." Wait,
you can absolutely see the people that
I
are
have
not
to be on
comfortable.
camera. So most people are uncomfortable. But what you have right here is a great approach, because we're just having a conversation, and it just happens to be a camera rolling. That's brilliant, because most people can succeed in the context of having a conversation. And when you ask them about things that they already love, you're just like lobbing softballs, and they're like, "Oh, I can do this," Grand slam. And then like you go back and you edit. The difference is I generally don't have an hour that I can use. I've got 2 minutes, So I'll take a 20-minute, 30-minute conversation and bring that down to 2 minutes or 3 minutes in a nice, concise story arc and make it inspiring.
So what does your average client look like, and how do these people find you? Because you are incredibly passionate. Your story is awesome. You have a diverse background. You are someone that would be, a really important part of someone's passion project. They're like, I need the right person to facilitate this and bring it to life correctly. How do you find your clients? Because it's almost like they have to know you.
Yeah, and that's really it. It's just relationship building. I don't do any advertising. It's relationship building. It's networking. I'm in a couple of networking groups where I just meet people, and there's a process to that a little bit. But a lot of my success, honestly, came from the relationships I already had at the churches. So they knew who I was. I knew who they were. They liked me. They said, "Yeah, we'll give this kid a shot," or "Yeah, I can't wait to work with you." And then just word of mouth. I mean, that's still, even today, that's what makes social media so successful, is the social part of it. And a lot of companies miss the social part. They just see it as a marketing platform. Well, you got to have the social part. You got to have the relationship part. And once people have that opportunity, once I have an opportunity to meet them and hear their story, I'm like, man, I'd love to bring that to life for you. would you like to? What's your passion? And I just came up with a tagline today, actually, just today.
Are you dropping it for the first
I got to
time?
drop it. It's the first time I'm dropping it publicly. I think if I get it right.
Yeah, I was going to say, get it right before you say it.
Michigan Video and Photography, we frame your passion into focus.
Bam.
Yeah.
Simple, straightforward. It hits the bullet points of what you want. Mm-hmm. I recently had an artist do a custom mural on my gaming room wall, and the funny thing is, I had so many artists that I put a post up, and I had so many people get tagged in it because I know a million people from being a professional fighter and traveling. I just know a million people, and all of these people reach out to me. Let me do it. Let me do it. Let me do it. And they all had credentials. This woman said one sentence where she's like, "I promise at the end of this piece, you will be in tears because I will bring your vision to life. Like, I don't care about my style.
Right.
I will do it the way that you envision it." And she's like, and that's what I think my gift is. I'm not an artist that can paint in one style. I'll show you my portfolio. I'm incredibly diverse. What matters to me is bringing my clients' passion to life. And as soon as I heard that, just the same way your tagline was, I was like, without question, I didn't care about the other people's credentials or anything like that. And actually, I'm going to do a spoiler on the podcast. First of all, I haven't shown this to the world, so nobody's seen this thing in my game room. It is absolutely incredible. I'll show you after the podcast. But this woman now, it's almost done. She took a picture and sent it to one of her friends that's really high up in art and was like, "Hey, like, look how incredible this is coming out." And it is like, I can't even describe to you how nice it is. But anyway, that friend sent it to someone at Amazon here in Michigan. Amazon is hiring her to be now the woman that will do all of the murals for Amazon in Michigan.
Nice.
She is like,
wow.
She called me up like, listen, like in tears, like my life drastically changed because you allowed me to paint this. So now Amazon brought her into one of their mega places and they were like, "Hey, we want to do a mural here." And she actually submitted a price for them and they were like, "We're going to like pay you way more than that."
That's
and
awesome.
So, but what it was to that very root thing of what you just spoke of. She showed me that the passion and vision I have, it comes first. It's not like you being like, "Well, I'm the director and I don't care how you want to brand your thing."
Right.
This is how it's being done.
Yeah, no thanks.
You're bringing someone's passion into focus.
Amen.
Yep. That is beautiful.
Yeah,
Brian.
and that's the approach. I mean, and like you resonate with that, and that's so empowering to people. And if you come with an agenda, people will know it right away. I mean, nobody's that dumb. We get it. And some people go, "Well, I'm going to deal with it anyway," and some people go, "No thanks." And I just don't even want to go there. I don't want to give people that. I don't want that dynamic. So that's totally my approach. And there's a lot of companies that'll be like, "Well, we figured this out and this is the right way to do it." And it's like, well, okay, maybe. If you find the right person that fits in that hole, okay, fine. And if that's your thing, great. But that's not my approach. My approach is I just want to be of value. And I think that's a wise long-term strategy because I think people resonate with that. And not just for business.
And really, the results that you produce will speak for themselves. And if I limit your passion and your ability to use your skill set by trying to shove you into a box, it's very hard to do that with passionate people or like in art. To shove it into something that it tries to fit doesn't really work. You have to almost trust the right person to use their skill set and take the vision that you have and bring it to life. Like, I understand that, and you may understand that, but a lot of other people may not see that. Like, you'll crush the ability to have that working relationship if you don't give them that freedom of expression. So we'll skip the coronavirus crisis because the world was just terrible for everybody, right? The world was terrible. Everything shut down, madness all over the place.
Great. Fast forward.
And we're still 2 weeks to flatten the curve is still going. But anyway, skipping past that, what would you say your goals are for your company? And like, if somebody heard this podcast and was like, "Man, like, I like this guy. I can tell that he's very committed to his work. He's passionate. I like his story. I might even just know someone that might want to use him." How do people reach out to you? How do people get in contact with you? And just like, what are the goals for your company in the perfect 5-year, 10-year plan? What do you see Michigan Video and Photography turning into?
Yeah, thanks, James. I appreciate that. Well, you can reach me my email, which is brian@mishvp.com, brian@michv as in Victor, P as in Paul.com. A lot easier to say than EMT Productions.
So much easier.
So much easier. And on my website, you can there's a contact form, and you can text me or call me on my cell phone. I'd be happy to give that to 810-599-1641. Don't abuse it, please, because I want to keep that dynamic. I really do. I don't know. I just believe in providing value and being real and genuine and relational. So I think a cell phone is kind of saying that without saying it. And that's my cell phone. That's the only one I got. That's the only way you would get a hold of me via phone. And my website is michvp.com, michvp.com. In 5 years, I don't know. I want it to be what the Lord wants it to be. And I hope, that I've got layers of awesome people that I'm working with that I can trust. You said trust earlier. That's a huge word, to trust. I hope I've got clients that trust me. I hope that I can trust the clients that I'm working with. I just want to change lives. I love lives that are changed, and I love telling that story. If I can do that more, that's awesome, because the world needs to see there's hope, there's grace, there's mercy, there's forgiveness, there's beautiful things happening all the time. All the time. Right in our little town of Brighton, whatever town you're in, there's beautiful things happening. I just want to bring those to life. I want the world to see that. And that's ultimately my agenda. I want to bring those things out, whatever they are. I'm not sure yet.
I have a gentleman that trains here. His name is Mike Ramsdale, and he runs Under the Hood Productions. He's put a couple films in Toronto Film Festival.
Cool.
He's done like The Anatomy of Hate that was in a bunch of schools. And he's done, but anyway, he's huge in the video production and that world as well. And the funny thing is, you have a lot of parallels in your story. When he was a young kid, right after high school, he was like, do I want to go be an actor? And he claims that he moved to Chicago to pursue his career in acting, but then saw a film. I don't want to mess up what film it was, but anyway, he saw a gentleman act, and I think it was Ethan Hawke. And he was like so blown away by the skill that guy had. No, it wasn't Ethan Hawke. It was the guy that played in Fight Club. Who was the guy that played in Fight Club? Not Brad Pitt, the other one.
Oh,
he's been in a million movies.
Oh gosh, I can't remember his tip of brain. I know who it is. He's very good.
He was the Hulk in one of the Hulk films.
He was the first Hulk film. Oh yeah, I can't remember his name. Edward Norton.
Edward Norton. That is definitely who it is.
He's
Ramsdale,
fantastic.
See that? I listened to every word. He watched Edward Norton act, and apparently he said, listen, the gap between me and that guy is so severe that I'm going to go a little bit elsewhere in direction. And so I always joke around like Edward Norton killed his dreams because he was just so talented on film. But Mike is massive in that world, and I know he's done a bunch of local productions. So I'd love to, I'm sure he's going to watch this episode. And maybe you two even just having interactions. The guy is constantly looking for other people in the film world. So I always like to network people together that are in the same passion.
Yeah, I love to meet him.
So, man, truly it was a pleasure sitting with you here today, Brian.
My pleasure.
It's great to hear your story. Great to hear that another good person that wants to influence the world, positively is doing his best. Yeah. We need more of that. We need more people that are willing to chase passions and live from their heart, because that makes the world a better place. When you're being your best, you tend to give your best.
Yeah, appreciate it. Let me give 2 plugs, if you will.
100%. Anything you want to do, you shout out right into the camera.
I'm not sure how yet, but I'd be happy to coach and encourage people. So I'm not sure what that means yet, but that's something that's on my radar. The other thing I'm really excited about, there's a prosthetic and orthotic company out of Bay City called Oakland Orthopedics, and we're working on a 6-episode reality show right now. That's gonna drop, I hope, at the beginning of 2022. So keep an eye out for that. And they're out of Bay City, not too far from here. They're doing amazing things. Like when someone has to lose a limb, either because of a medical condition or because of an accident, that's incredibly traumatic, right? And they're the kind of company, they've been around for 50 years. They're the kind of company that's going to make sure that people get what they need no matter what. And I love that, especially in today's day and age. It's pretty rare with how expensive everything is. It's mind-boggling how expensive everything is. So I respect that company tremendously, and can't wait to get that stuff out there. It'll be pretty awesome.
100%. And you just touched on coaching. I just had a gentleman not long ago named Jason Tracy. He runs Roar Consulting, which is like a leadership and
I've met him before.
Oh, you've met Jason.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I'll put you in touch with him, because
please.
he's coaching people in the business world and other worlds to find success. So much of life is networking and just finding the right people or the right resources, or knowing that this guy that knows this guy that has this opportunity. Maybe you two should talk. So
and one more thing, if you don't mind.
No, of course,
you can cut this part out if you want to, but what can I pray for you about, James?
That I just continue to follow my dreams, because there's not anything in particular. I feel like one of the most blessed men that ever lives. I'm not kidding. When I wake up in the morning and I get to come in here and I get to be around people that I love, and I get to travel around the world, I've been everywhere. I've been to so many countries, and I haven't just gone places. I have been alongside dream chasers, filled with passion, living life so vibrantly, and watching them succeed. Like, I've walked people out to the Grand Garden Arena in Vegas to fight I remember when they joined my team and they were in a little amateur that didn't even think they had the potential to go pro, or were fighting in Rio de Janeiro, or we're in Japan or Tokyo, or Tokyo's in Japan, or China, you know what I mean? And it's been like, honest to God, feel like one of the most blessed people that ever lived. So I guess just if you want to, anything to pray for me, just pray that I stay the course, that I stay on that path, that I don't ever lose gratitude from where I'm at. Like, I try to constantly remind myself, like, there are so many people that do not have the life experience that you have. So, like, you better be grateful for it. And I'll tell you what, there's a weird darkness to success that not a lot of people talk about. Whereas if you set a goal and you achieve that goal and you don't set new goals, there's a little bit of a depression. Yeah. Because you find most of your happiness in journeys. So when you're on a journey to becoming something, that vision of the future pulls you forward, because you're like, oh, I'm going to get that. No matter what it is, it could be materialistic, it could be non-materialistic. It could be like when I get that new house, when I get that new car, or it could be when I bring this play to life, when I get my business to this level, whatever it is, that journey creates happiness. But then if you get to the end of that journey and you have not found out a new thing, there's a weird, like one of my buddies that comes in here and trains, he has a brand new Lamborghini, and he paid $300,000 for his car. And when I talked to him about it, because to me it's such a, like, you have a $300,000 car. That's more than I sold my last house for. It's like, it's just my car. And it's like, it keeps me grounded to the fact that, like, no matter what you're chasing, when you get there, it's just a thing. It's just your reality. So, man, like, just enjoy the ride, stay grateful along the way, and, like, stay the course. And you know what I mean? And if you're going to pray for anything, pray that I keep that same energy for people and for life, because I think when people like us can live fully from our hearts, passionately, influencing others to do the same. Like, don't look at my success and be jealous, or be like, man, I'm not as good as him, or just say, if he can do it, I can do it. Because that's just a human being. You know what I mean? And I tell all my students that, like, I'm just a totally average guy that was like, this is the path that I'm going to pursue. And regardless of any obstacle, I will get to where I want to be. You know what I mean? If I get knocked down, I'll get back up. Right on. So, man, like I said, truly an honor sitting with you here today, Brian. I told you we would limit this thing in an hour, but we went in almost an hour and a half. Yeah. But, man, all good. Stellar conversation. Appreciate it. Truly an honor. And again, anyone that wants to reach out to Brian, he dropped his contact information on here. And check out his website at mishvp.com. And you can get in touch with me as well as if you'd like to reach Brian. So thank you for being on the episode, and we'll wrap this thing up.
Thanks, James.